Good morning. You guys good? All right. Good morning. My name is Marvin Pendarvis, state representative. I'm also an attorney. And standing with me here today is Miss Alexis DePass, mother of the juvenile who was arrested on Monday, April the 1st, whose son was arrested here on Monday, April the 1st at the Walmart by the Summerville Police Department. Along with me are Uncle Mr. Kenneth Stewart, members of the Racial Justice Network, the Somerville branch of the NAACP, and the local community. Standing before you this morning because we just got done watching the video of what unfolded on April the 1st. And what I can tell you is that in watching the video with the family and talking with the officers as a result, it's an unfortunate situation that escalated to a point that was unnecessary. What we saw in the video was a young man who wanted to sell roses in front of a Walmart. You see two officers, particular Officer G and Officer Kirkland, who stopped him. Upon stopping him, they immediately approached him and asked him whether he had any kind of ID or license to sell roses in front of that Walmart. Now, the questioning of whether he had an ID or any license isn't of the particular matter currently. What is problematic is the nature by which he was approached. On the video, you will see that Officer G immediately and aggressively approaches him, asking for ID, asking for if he had any kind of license, and it was in an aggressive manner. What I will submit to you is the way that he approached the young man was not in a way, it suggested to me and suggested to this family that it was not going to be a situation that he wanted to diffuse, but in fact escalate to a matter that it ultimately did. You will see on the video that the officer grabs the minor by the hand, at which point he attempts to subdue him. During that attempt to subdue him, the minor is taken to the ground, at which point there's another officer, Officer Kirkland, who pulls out a taser, briefly points it at the minor, but at this point he was already in handcuffs and subdued. You will see not only in the video but also the other videos that have been surrounded that his head hits the concrete multiple times while he's already detained in handcuffs. They basically got him on the ground, and there seems to be this aggressive attempt to try to subdue him. What we will tell you is this was an overreaction. This was an escalation, and there was no attempt to try to de-escalate the event from the time that they approached him. We will acknowledge, yes, the officers had called out on a loudspeaker, asking the young man and the other juvenile who was with them to leave the premises. But this young man sells roses quite often. And while this was his first time at Walmart, he had been selling roses at other businesses for quite some time. And those of us who live in or familiar with the Charleston area recognize that these rose peddlers are just young people who share in an entrepreneurial spirit and want to do something and make an honest buck. And that's all he was doing. And to be approached in an aggressive manner by a police officer who, in my opinion, and by looking at the video, did not have any immediate intention on trying to de-escalate the situation, but rather escalating it to a point of aggression, to a point where this young man was physically subdued, taken to the ground, handcuffed, head hitting the cement a couple of times, and ultimately leading to some physical injuries by him. Now, in talking with the police department, they will be releasing the video. We've called on the video to be released publicly. and that will be happening. And so media will be provided a copy of that video so you all can see what we just saw. But what I will tell you is that, and the police department acknowledge, and I will tell you, they acknowledge it's a bad look. I want to quote, it's a bad look. And what happened should not have happened. It should not have escalated to the level that it did. And it's unfortunate. And the young man not only physically is harmed, but the emotional toll that is taken on him, his family, as a result of it, is one that he will be dealing with and they will be dealing with for quite some time. I know that there are questions surrounding, and you saw in the reports that there were allegations that the young man struck one of the female officers, Officer Kirkland. I can tell you, in looking at the video, that is not clear. And we asked the police chief and the officers who showed us in the room about that specifically. We asked, where do you see the young man striking her? We played that clip multiple times, and it is not clear that this young man strikes this officer. What you see is him handcuffed with the left hand. There's a handcuff on the left hand, and then there's another officer, Officer G, that basically has him subdued and engaged with his right arm. And so it's hard to come to the conclusion, in my mind, in looking at the video, that there would have been time or seeing where he struck this officer. The way it reads in the media reports and the way it's been presented to you all suggests that there was some open fist or closed fist punch to this officer. That is not clear in my viewing of the video. We all looked at it, and that was a question that came up quite a bit. And so again, I will tell you, what happened to this young man was wrong. The police department certainly acknowledges that it is a bad look, and that, in my estimation, things could have and should have been handled differently. But we're going to pursue this. We want to make sure that not only are we getting justice for this family and what happened, because he's been charged criminally, and we want to make sure that those charges are resolved. But the civil component of this case requires us to make sure that this doesn't happen to any other young people who want to engage in some kind of entrepreneurial business outside. And there are a couple of questions that I have, and then I'll yield for any questions that the media may have. But in looking at the video and talking with the officers, it begs the question, how did we devolve to a point where we're criminalizing and targeting these young men who are rose peddlers? This isn't the first situation where these rose peddlers have come under scrutiny. This is something that's been unique to Charleston quite a bit. Those who live in the Charleston area know about them downtown. The young man was simply trying to earn an honest buck. And the way the officer approached this young man, it was as if he had already determined he was guilty from the outset. It was with the intention to get this young man off the property when all he was doing was trying to earn his honest buck and not doing anything to harass. And now I'll let you ask some questions after in a second, Raphael. But there are a couple of questions that I would ask, and these are questions that we're asking the Summerville Police Department, and we will ask, but I'm interested to know how many citations have been issued at this particular location for rose peddlers. They say that you need a business license to operate. Well, I'm interested to know how many business licenses have been applied for and received as a result of this over the last year or so. You know, those are questions that we must ask, because it's not uncommon, whether it's Girl Scouts or church groups or Little League groups, to gather in front of storefronts, whether it's selling cookies, selling lemonade, selling whatever, to make an honest buck, to raise money for particular situations. And this young man was no different. And so how do we get to the point of criminalizing them, criminalizing him? And is the ordinance being applied evenly? Is it being applied fairly? And is it being applied justly? I would submit to you it's not, but that's why we want to pursue this, because those are the questions that we want to ask. And then I'll end with this, and then I'll yield for any questions. Well, I'll yield for any questions, then and then turn it over. But we have to get to a point. I understand and recognize law enforcement has a difficult job to do. I think any of us who are standing up here today are sympathetic to that. But we have to weigh that with and against the interests of the public, and making sure that the decisions that are made are not going to be harmful, or they're not going to unfairly target people and put innocent people in harm's way. But again, there's a video that will show so much of what I've just outlined. You all will be getting a copy of that video, and you can dissect that as you wish. But I thank you all for being here. Again, just this family is grieving, and so I'm not going to have the mother speak and or any of the other family members speak. And so I ask that you not ask any questions directed at her, because she's not going to speak. But it was important for her to be here to talk about the situation, because it is important, and we want to prevent it from happening to the next person.
What was Chief Wright's reaction to watching the video with you? Did he support the officer's methods of apprehension at all?
Well, the chief did acknowledge that it's a bad look, okay? And so he recognizes in that statement that things probably could have been handled differently. Did he explicitly say that? No, but I believe he recognizes things could have been handled differently in this respect. But obviously he's defending, the officer's actions. I believe there's a difference in how we view the video, and they've alleged that this young man struck this officer, and that kind of was the reason for him being subdued in the way, or being charged in the way that he was charged. But he does acknowledge that it's a bad look. It shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have gone down the way that it did, and it was unfortunate that it happened.
Did the young man resist arrest?
The young man was, I will tell you, the young man did not want to be arrested because he did not feel like there was anything that he had done wrong. Okay. And so that I will make that pretty clear. You'll see on the video. You have an officer that approaches him. He's selling roses, and the officer comes aggressively asking him questions about where his ID is, where his license is, when he's just out in front of a Walmart. But that officer, not telling him he's under arrest, not saying that there was any particular crime he had committed at that point, literally grabs him with the intentions of trying to physically subdue him. At that point, when he grabbed him, the young man is naturally shocked and trying to figure out why did it lead to this? Why did it lead to that?
Do we know any previous incidents with these officers of this kind?
It's my understanding that the officer G is a former North Charles police officer, that there have been similar incidents involving this particular officer in the past. And that's something that we'll explore, investigate. But that's all I'll say right now. But that is something that we've learned. That's an angle that we're pursuing, and one that gives us room for concern.
And it was reported that he was originally charged with third-degree assault and battery, and then it was updated that he was charged with assaulting an officer in official officer-related duties. I mean, can you go into any detail about why that was changed and the reasoning behind those charges being updated somewhat 24 hours later?
I don't know, and I can't tell you. That is a question that we did ask the police chief. The only response we got is it may have been related to them believing that the young man struck this particular officer, Officer Kirkland, and charging him as a result of that. But we've got, we don't believe the charges are just, and those are ones that we intend to fight vigorously.
Those charges, were they upgraded or downgraded?
She suggested that they were up. My understanding is he was charged with a town ordinance. That's what we were told just now.
Okay. So not for assaulting an officer. It was for the town ordinance that he was charged?
Correct,
Okay.
right. And there may be a similar charge under that town ordinance,
Got it.
but it's not a general sessions charge.
What do you want to come out of this? Do you want want these officers gone? Do you want the whole department to be held accountable? What's the goal?
Well, in any situation, we want accountability. We want the officers and law enforcement to acknowledge what's done. This is a bigger picture. This is bigger than just this one incident. Yes, we want justice for the family and what happened to this particular minor because it shouldn't have happened, and we believe it escalated to a point that it shouldn't have. I'll wait. We believe it escalated to a point that it shouldn't have. But beyond that, I think there needs to be a real discussion about these incidents. We need to have a real discussion about what's happening with rose peddlers, how they're treated in the public eye, how they're treated by these businesses and law enforcement in general, because this isn't going to be the last rose peddler that's trying to earn an honest buck in front of a Walmart or any particular business in Summerville or any area in the Low Country. And so we have to have a real conversation about what that looks like, how, in my opinion, they're unfairly criminalized and targeted, and coming to some resolution regarding that. And so that's what justice is.
Official program in the city of Charleston is an official organization.
I'm unfamiliar with the city of Charleston's program. I do recall there being something of that nature, but I'm unfamiliar with their program.
And I know you mentioned that the child is suffering from some physical injuries right now as well as an emotional toll. I mean, can you give any details on how he's doing physically, if he's returned to school, kind of how he's doing?
Well, it's spring break this week, but he's not doing well. I'll say that at that.
While you all were inside of the room with the chief and everything, and they seen how everything was conducted, did they say this was normal protocol, the way that the officers were on top of the...
We asked those questions, and the way it was described to us seemed to suggest that they believe it was normal protocol.
And just to be clear, do you believe this was racially charged?
Do we believe it was racially charged? I believe, in a way, yes. I believe that, and that's oftentimes these rose peddlers are young African American males that are honestly trying to make a decent living and an honest buck. And so there are times when they're in front of these businesses and they're approached by officers. The public generally views it as, there are a lot of people who view them negatively and view them as some kind of nuisance instead of the young entrepreneurs that they are. And so it speaks to a larger problem that we have in society about the over-criminalization of our African American youth. Again, making sure that law enforcement officers understand the history of what they're doing when it comes to the roses and making these roses, and supporting that and creating an environment where they can thrive, but not be criminalized and not be unfairly targeted.
You mentioned that you respect law enforcement and you have a healthy appreciation for what they do. How do you think an officer could have approached this situation differently? How would you have liked to have seen it?
Well, from the outset, if the intention truly was to get him to disperse and to get him to cease the activity, then I think a conversation would have, approaching him in a non-aggressive manner would have probably been the best approach. It was clear. I don't know what had been going on with this officer prior to this incident in that day, but he seemed to have escalated to a point of frustration and anger immediately upon meeting the victim, which, again, if there's that kind of volatility where you're approaching a situation, then naturally it's going to escalate and progress to a manner that's not conductive or productive for anyone. And so, the way he approached it initially could have been better and more conducive to de-escalating the situation and trying to get him to truly disperse and not creating a situation where you're immediately threatening arrest. You're immediately saying, this is what I'm going to do to you. You need to stop this, and asserting your force, but more so in a manner where it's collaborative and respectful to what he's doing and showing that, hey, I'm trying to enforce an ordinance. That's all I'm trying to do, and here's how I would like to, here's what I need you to do.
Is legal action forthcoming?
Yes.
Was it your understanding that the officer was responding from a request from the business, or if not, if he was taking it upon himself to
So I asked that question. I was told that those officers are contracted or have been requested by Walmart to provide security for that area to enforce trespassing ordinances and other ordinances outside the area. So they weren't responding to any particular requests, but just patrolling the area per their duties with their agreement with Walmart.
And how does that support your narrative that this is sort of a targeted look at targeting these individuals?
Well, I think it does that. I mean, if you're patrolling the Walmart area, I'm not sure how these rose peddlers are, piquing your attention to the point where you feel like you have to come to them aggressively to stop the behavior. If they're not bothering any customers or doing anything that's a particular nuisance, then I'm not, and again, if there's a license required, that's fine. But how often are you requiring this, and are you applying that fairly everywhere? If there was a lemonade stand set up there, would the results have been the same? If there were Girl Scouts set up there, would the results have been the same?
There's a section of the police report, I'm told, that mentions the rose peddlers or shoplifters. Summerville, in reference to juveniles loitering to sell palmetto roses, it was known to officers that several businesses complained about shopliftings committed by the juveniles, and that several of the juveniles involved in the sales of palmetto roses are on written indefinite trespass notice for multiple businesses in both North Main Market and Azalea Square.
I asked that. What I will tell you is this juvenile, the one that we represent, was not on any trespass notice. He has not been cited for any violations of any town ordinance related to rose peddling. And in fact, he's been doing this at quite a number of other businesses and has been supported in his efforts. In fact, several minutes before this incident happened, there was a young woman who approached him and bought a rose from him and talked about how respectful and how nice he was and how they weren't causing any issues. And so this particular young man there was no reason to think that he was a threat or a target or needed to not be on that premises because he had not caused any issues in the past.
The,
And,
vid-
no, go ahead.
the video you saw today, it was body cam and
It was body cam, officer body cam, that's it.
One officer's body cam?
The two officers body cam. There was two body cams, Officer Kirkland, Officer G, and then we saw the in-car camera from one of the vehicles.
And I mean, going off of the question about shoplifting, I mean, a lot of this conversation has been the misconceptions of rose peddlers. With that part in the report, and you say that he's not one of those people listed on that trespassing notice, I mean, how can that kind of play into, the common misconceptions?
It proves the point that I'm trying to make. I mean, if you're already, if you're lumping everyone into this category and saying just because we've had incidents in the past and deeming him an immediate trespasser, then every law enforcement officer that comes across a rose peddler is going to think that they've been involved in some kind of trespass, and it's going to force them to approach it in this manner. That's why we have to have a real conversation about what's happening with rose peddlers. It's unfair to them, to their entrepreneurial spirit, and it's not conducive to good law enforcement and trying to make sure we truly police this community.
And obviously, the Summerville, this happened in Summerville, it's the Summerville Police Department, but because it raises a bigger question, do you think this is something that you'll be asking for change in Charleston, Dorchester, all the
Yes.
other counties around?
Yes. Yes.
I seen in the police report, the officers referred to the minors as two male blacks. When you were in the meeting with the officers, did they make any mention of this is how they refer to people of color, or?
They did not, but I mean, they were two black males, yes. The two minors were two young black males.
Do you know what the specific ordinances that the police are saying rose peddlers violate?
I do not, but that's a question that's been requested. I mean, we want to know all we can learn about this specific ordinance. When is it, how much is a license, how many people are actually applying to these licenses, how many calls have they got because of violations of this ordinance, how often is it being applied. We want to know those answers because I think it helps us really paint the picture a little bit clearer. All right, I'm going to have Elder Johnson with the Racial Justice Network have a few words.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know, I am Elder James Johnson, the CEO of Racial Justice Network. We have 5 civil rights attorneys within the organization. State Representative Pendarvis is one of our legal team here for the organization. My question to this police department, considering this officer record, what in the world he doing working here? He's been let go from Spartanburg Police Department and also North Charleston. Why he's here in Summerville? Evidently, they should have seen the red flag that this officer have a serious problem with obeying the law. We want to know 100% from this police department what they are going to do about his record. We want him gone. We don't want him patrolling Summerville at all. I have instructed my team of people and my attorney to send letters to SLED and to Attorney General and to the Academy to investigate this officer. He should not be working nowhere in South Carolina, and we want that to quit. We do not want that nowhere in South Carolina. We're not going to tolerate in Dorchester, Berkeley, or Charleston County police brutality anymore. This could have been a George Floyd. It was enough force on this young man's neck. At 13 years old, I would like to ask this officer, would he stand by and allow someone to do that to his son? And I'm probably sure he would not. And you ask the question, you ask Attorney Pendarvis the question, if it's racially motivated, I think it is. Very much so. You don't see white folks are being abused by a police department. And we're not going to stand for it one bit. And we will sit out in front of this police department and protest it until this officer is gone from this police department. And that is a promise. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Well, thank you all for being here. As I said, the video will be released right now. The only holdup is making sure that we are able to blot out the minors' faces, just for obvious purposes. But you all, they're in the process of doing that, and I suspect either today or tomorrow, you all should be receiving a copy of the video, and do it with it as you will. But I think once you see the video, you will see why we're standing here today in support of this family, why we're frustrated, and why we believe justice needs to be served.
Is that going to come from your office?
The video?
Yeah.
So I believe, it's my understanding that the police department is going to reach out to you all and make sure that they're provided. Now, I have been provided or will be provided a copy of the video today, and if that isn't, all the videos today, and if that isn't in there, then I'll make sure. But I believe the one that I'm going to get is unredacted as far as the video, the faces, and so I'll make sure that you all get a copy of whatever you need.
They should provide us with one also.
You mentioned he was 13 years old. That was the first time I had heard the age.
That's correct. He's 13
years old.
And you said, you may have mentioned it before, but you said justice. What is justice for this particular case?
Justice for this is the officer leaving here.
And I will tell you, we want accountability. We want law enforcement officers to be held accountable. But justice also looks like making sure that we take away the stigma about the criminalization and the over-criminalization, rather, of these rose peddlers, these young people who are trying to make a living. There has to be a serious conversation. I'm going to harken back to that as much as I can, because I don't want that to be lost in the conversation. Yes, there's going to be civil action pursued. Yes, we're going to pursue legal action. Yes, we want the officer held accountable. Yes, we want the police department to acknowledge what happened and to make real changes toward making sure that this doesn't happen again. But there has to be a real conversation about the incident, how it happened, how we got here, and how we can make sure that we don't get here again. Thank you all for being here.